Hello, I'm Beatrice Newman. We're doing something a little different for this series, and I'll be your host instead of your usual host, Peter. This is the Underrepresented Entrepreneur series. Being a Black female founder myself, I know how hard it can be to do business in London. This series tells the stories of founders that have successfully navigated business where sometimes their backgrounds limit opportunities. In today's episode, we're joined by Arooj Aftab, fashion activist, cultural strategist, and disruptor of the status quo. We unpack what diversity really means beyond optics and buzzwords, and explore how Arooj champions culture over colour, challenges performative inclusion, and takes a firm stance on representation, refusing to be present in spaces where she's expected to bring her own seat to the table. She's done with diversity as we know it, and she's here to reframe conversation. But what happens when the only way in is on someone else's terms?
I'll be honest, I never really questioned my identity until I was made to question it. Somebody would make me be like, oh, what is this? Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of incidents of seeing racism when I was younger, especially being in the North. But I mainly thought that was my religion, not my race. And I think the biggest thing I got when I was starting off is, oh, you don't look Pakistani. And that was a compliment. And I still get it to this day. And it's kind of like, what is?
Let's get this conversation going with Arooj on today's episode of Venturing into Fashion Tech. And hi everybody, we have Arooj Aftab. Arooj. It's so good you can say it twice. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm actually chilling. The weather's been nice. It's been pleasant. Feels like summer a little bit. Yeah, I'm good. How about you?
So nice. I'm loving the background of your apartment as well, because some vibes are going on.
I've got to have like different bits of artwork, which only makes like sense to me and my sister who lives with me, So it's like Peter the Prince and all that sort of stuff. I had, how can I show personality? And I was like, okay, yeah, cool. Art.
Definitely.
It's friends, yeah.
One of the best ways to show personality. Arooj, on that note, tell me about yourself.
So yeah, I'm Arooj. I am a cultural consultant. I consult brands on representation. It's kind of hard to describe what I do because I feel like I'm just creative. I lecture sometimes, I consult brands, but the overall main theme in what I do is around accessibility and diversity, inclusion, representation, and storytelling. I'm trying to make, I guess, fashion and the arts a lot more visible to marginalised communities, and whether it's students having access to the industry or the industry having hires behind the scenes and actual people in decision-making roles, and then in front of camera and what we see. So I always say culture over colour and keep the fashion industry moving in a way that's thriving, and that's what's important to me. We need to look beyond the surface when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Let's get straight into that, because with what's going on currently in America, which tends to spread across the globe, and with DEI being taken away by a lot of really big organizations, I mean, where do you then come in ensuring that these practices are continually upheld and the importance of it is continually shared?
I think when, with the situation in America, I'm not surprised that it's happening. I feel like most people who are pushing for this equity or inclusion, they're going to be the middle class white man that's going to be threatened by it. So it's kind of like, how do we navigate this space? But I think, I'm not surprised with America. Also understand there's a ripple effect in the UK. How many people actually care about diversity inclusion? But we need to actually understand what is diversity inclusion. I think it's been lost in translation of whatever it is. And I think if we're looking at the current climate and the current times, diversity inclusion in traditional ways is not what it used to be. And we have to really understand that it is understanding the state of the world. It can be a little bit political, but it's not political. It's not a controversial thing. It is literally, how do we see community and how are they able to access what they need to access? That's literally what it's about. It's about ensuring that people have access equally to other people who have access, I think people are threatened by diversity inclusion in aspects that other communities are trying to take over or whatever is in people's minds. So I think when it comes to what I do, I really love to hold on to storytelling, and I really love to hold on to being in the UK, beyond London, but also London. And again, it goes back to think of culture over colour. Like, how do we look beyond surface level for actual representation and storytelling? How do we actually access communities that need need support to thrive? But yeah, I think going back to what we're seeing in America, I think the independent sort of people that are doing diversity and inclusion have some more, I guess, more freedom in moving around certain industries, whereas the amount of people that are being made redundant or fired I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a bit scary, because we are still at a distance for power, because we're still not necessarily in the decision-making roles. We still have to go through that approval process. So if the people in the approval process are not listening, then I'm unsure or uncertain of what the future of actual diversity inclusion looks like. But I think I'm still optimistic.
So let's dig into that a bit more, because when you talk about community and the work that you do, I mean, your work spans fashion, activism, and inclusion. So maybe could you talk about some of the early experiences that have shaped your drive to center underrepresented voices in everything that you do?
Yeah, so I started down with diversity, which is part of my, I guess, theme of consulting. So I don't use the word diversity, actually. I feel like it makes a non-disabled, heterosexual, white man and woman look normal. Anybody who's not that is diverse. Now, my skin color is not diverse. So and also not always somebody's appearance. So how can we look beyond surface level? And the way I started that was, I did a BBC documentary in 2018 called My Tumour Made Me Trendy. I was born with a condition called neurofibromatosis. This is where non-cancerous tumours grow inside my nose and skin. The entire left side of my body has a slight disfigurement to it, along with tumour growths, a benign on the left side. And I did this documentary, and it was mainly about me coming out with this condition. But at the time, I had a fashion blog. I just finished fashion communications at university, and I was working in the modelling industry. But I was still at blogging at the time, and I was put up for like these influencer stuff and these awards, and on the basis that I wore oversized fits. That's how simple it was back then. On the basis that I was wearing menswear and androgynous fits, it was like, ooh, what's this girl doing? But I think what people didn't realise was I was hiding a condition, and menswear was the only sort of thing that I could hide with. But not that I was ashamed, but I just didn't really want people to know. And it's also not obvious that I've got something, but I think when you've got something and it's in your head, you just want to be invisible for as long as possible. So I did this documentary in 2018, and I think in the first day of the release, the Newsbeat article got 1.5 million hits. And I freaked out. I was like, oh, what the hell? Like, I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I can't believe this. It's really overwhelming. Cut forward from being one of 4 women of colour on my university course out of 100 and something students, to being one of the first Muslim brown girls to work at this agency that I was working at in the modelling industry, to then doing this documentary and being put into the diversity box. I realised I was the only person that looked like me, but also understood what it was to be me versus the people creating their campaigns. And I went from being told diversity is people that look like me, which I was like, oh yeah, cool, okay, I get it, to then questioning it when I was put in the box. Because I was like, what is diversity? Because I'm looking around, so I'm getting these campaigns, I'm getting so many things come my way, but it was all diversity campaigns. But the teams behind the scenes did not reflect what was on camera. And I was the only one versus me against other talent. And I was like, what is diversity? And then that's where it hit me. I was like, oh my God, my skin color is not diverse. Having a disability is not diverse. This is so surface level. It makes, again, as I said, the non-disabled, heterosexual, white man and woman normal. Who decided that, you know? So that's when I started down with diversity. That's when I started this whole move into diversity, inclusion and community. And ever since then, I've been actively trying to push beyond surface level, any form of surface level representation, because I don't think there's any longevity in it. I don't think the people necessarily who are behind the scenes that run diversity and inclusion campaigns or use to run diversity inclusion campaigns are culturally intelligent in what is being portrayed and the messaging and the impact and power that has. So ever since then, I've been quite pushy on how can we make this more authentic, and how can we not box up communities that are already boxed up? We have to stop that because we're constantly boxing, and there's zero longevity in how community is portrayed. And it's like, we're separate, this is separate, another thing is separate, but everything's one collective fight with a few little tweaks for each community.
I think that's really phenomenal, and thank you so much for taking us through that journey. And it tends to, like you're saying, box people up because then you have the race issue, then you have the sex issue, then you have the able or disabled issue. In actual fact, diversity is so nuanced and so complex. It does involve everyone. It's humanity in itself. And so when you're not really able to understand that there is no such thing as normal or perfect, and you're able to really build a creative world like where we're working in a moment, where you do have people in production who are so understanding of all these different facets and are not coming at it from a singular point of view. And something that I find that actual diverse people, when you're talking about color, race, or able or disabled, have had to live with their whole life and build into their mental psyche and vocabulary, right? I would love to then dig a bit deeper then in regards to you being a British, South Asian and Muslim woman, and how understanding all these complexities of diversity, how it's influenced how you approach fashion and story.
I'll be honest, I never really questioned my identity until I was made to question it. And that's the truth. I'm from Bradford, where majority of people look like me, right? So we're in a population that is majority Asian up in North West Yorkshire. I never really questioned like my identity, that somebody would make me be like, "Oh, what is this?" Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of incidents of seeing racism when I was younger, especially being in the North. And I think at the time it was the British National Party that used to march the street. But I mainly thought that was my religion, not my race. So I knew people had an issue with the religion. And then it wasn't until, I guess, as I got moved out of the city to explore my creative avenues that I was then made to question my race. And I think the biggest thing I got when I was starting off is, "Oh, you don't look Pakistani." And that was a compliment. And I was like, don't get me wrong, I took it as a compliment when I was a kid, because I thought, oh my God, like, they think I'm cool. And I think when you have a media portrayal for so long that you're not cool and you're sort of the background person, or you're invisible, or you're the enemy, or you're not educated, or whatever portrayal we have in media, I was like, yes, that's a compliment. But I was like 16, 15, until I got old, and I was like, what? What is, and I still get it to this day. You don't look Pakistani. And it's kind of like, what is Pakistan? Like, I'm brown one, like majority of South Asians kind of look similar with a few distinct, like, different features. I'm always curious to know what people have in their mind, especially when it's from a non-South Asian person. I'm like, what is that? Because I think there's a lot that sort of shapes who you are and how you sort of navigate, but race never became a question until later on in life. It was always my disability or my condition that I've got. So I feel like as a kid, then getting the teens, I was battling this condition, religion, race, all this thing at once. And when I look back, I think that's quite a lot for like a young person to take on. And I know that even in this day and age, ever since I've been lecturing and teaching, the kids today have a different battle. Like, it's a whole different ball game, where I'm like, what? Okay, I thought I was struggling, but these guys, like, it's almost so subtle, but you're almost like, how do you navigate these spaces?
When you talk about some of the comments that you have received in your youth, such as, you don't look Pakistani, I mean, I can liken that to when people used to say, "Oh, you're pretty for a black girl." And it's like, I'm just pretty. Why do you have to emphasize for a black girl? It means then there's a stereotype or story or narrative that's already free-formed or formed in people's minds that black girls are not beautiful or pretty, similar to Pakistanis are not cool, or it's not great to look like a Pakistani. Like, what does that really mean? And so I guess what I'm coming down to is, you in such a powerful position and what you're playing, you know, your personal experiences, how have they shaped how you tell fashion narratives and stories to reshape that narrative for the world, for others to be more educated and stereotypes shouldn't really be existing. And definitely if they do exist, should be in line with how others have told you the authentic story, right?
I think when it comes to fashion, I've always like mixed South Asian heritage. Like even like these earrings, for example, I'm always going to be in Pakistani jewel with English clothes. And it's not even a deliberate choice. It's like I just like it. And I think it looks sick. So I'm just going to wear it. It's weird because I think as people that come from culture and ethnic groups, we don't think about how can I be the most ethnic today. It's like we just integrate it in what we do. So I think, you know, it's a subconsciously thing that you just integrate into fashion naturally. And from the craftsmanship that we come from, I know that I really value fashion in all its forms. And for me, I think fashion became a really big sort of turning point ever since I was young. From seeing the clothes, then sort of being a British Asian is like balancing my Western wear to my Asian wear. Like when it was on uniform day in schools, people were like, "Oh my god, like what do your parents do?" Super loaded. I'm like, no, I just like security. Like it's not that deep. Like this is from like a fast fashion shop, but it's how you style things. And I think from growing up and seeing how things are worn versus just being worn was quite impressive. And that's how I think identity is shaped. Like the layering, the color theory is always subconsciously there without us having to think about it. And I think that's just naturally been a progression for me. But yeah, I don't think about like when I'm trying to be me, how can I look so Asian today in my Western clothes? It's just I might pick up a pair of rings or I might pick up a pair of, but it's not something I think about. I just need jewelry to go with my house. And this is what I have.
I love that. And the earrings are gorgeous, by the way. But I've admired, yeah, they're amazing. And just like you say, we don't overthink it because it's just there in our DNA. And I think that's the beauty of it and what we bring in regards to a little bit of seasoning, if you will, into the very white Western climate or understanding of what fashion is. And I think that's why, again, I say it's important that people like ourselves are embedded within the ecosystem where we can really help build or bring in a dynamic and point of view. And I think sort of coming back to that, we've talked about how you approach fashion and storytelling through your own lens. Could you maybe talk to us about how you've consulted on some really powerful campaigns and initiatives and even share a moment where you saw how the impact was a result of your inclusion in that work?
You know what? There's been a mixture of stuff actually. And it's not like one thing. I think when people think campaign, they think visual, one thing, creative. And I think a lot of it is actually just seeding what I've done and what I like to do. I always say, you know, you seed as much as you can on whichever flowers grow, they're going to flourish when you go there. You're not trying to do everywhere because not everyone is wanting to receive it. So it's like, how can you authentically not compromise who you are, but also go into a place that you can actually consult and actually thrive. And yeah, I think, you know, so in the past, like, you know, I think the most rewarding things that come to mind is probably hosting the first ever iftar during Ramadan for Bicester Village. And I don't think any brand had done that before. And now we're seeing brands do it. And I feel like that was a ripple effect. Like, I don't know any brand that was doing it until the team at Bicester and I got together and were like, I think that majority of your footfall is like you go to Bicester Village and you see the communities that are there. And I'm like, have you ever spoken directly to like the Muslim community or like the Arab community or the South Asian community? And like, yeah, like they do it in their campaigns, and I think they do a great job, Bicester Village anyway. Like they're a super cool brand, you know. And then we were just like, all right, how do we feel about hosting an iftar? You know, 20 people from the luxury fashion industry, writers, talent, influencers, journalists, whatever, like just to find those 20 people in a room and break bread together. It is just a dinner, really. I think that play-up, it is a dinner, but we're doing it during Ramadan, was quite powerful. So the first year we had, 2023, we did 20 people at the Londoner. The year after, we did 43 people at the Savoy. And the year after, because of the climate of the world, I thought it was really important to not segregate and keep it. I think people really misunderstand what Ramadan is or what we do. So I thought we have to have some sort of unification where we inviting our neighbours to come in and be like, oh my God, we're going to break bread together. I think that to me is a really turning move, because I think I've always been quite passionate about how, I guess, faith, doesn't matter what faith you're from, but how faith is perceived by people. And that also ties into diversity and inclusion. I think that is one of the biggest divides we are actively seeing in terms of how people misunderstand others or how people might judge other communities.
There's a point actually on your website, and I think it's a beautiful phrase and we need to reference it, but I feel like it sums up everything that you're talking about with what you did for the event at Bicester Village to celebrate Ramadan. And it's why I'm fighting to ditch the term diversity and how we can actually become more inclusive without it. I mean, could you expand on that term just a little bit for us?
I actually wrote an article for Stylist magazine for that as well. And I think when it comes to diversity, I think it's so easy just to use a word and act like the job's done. I also think words cause a lot more division than actual inclusion. So if anybody listening to this, if I was to say, what is diversity? And we just pause on that for a second. And if the first thing that comes to mind is a few black and brown people in a room, then immediately I think that thought is so damaging. Because what you're now saying is that black and brown is not equal to white. And therefore we need diversity to have these people, or we need some sort of diversity initiative to have these people in the same room as somebody who might be a white counterpart. Scrap that. How about we don't have these terms and we just create inclusion first? The way I see it is you can't have diversity when the whole sort of system for inclusion isn't there in the first place. You have to start with the inclusion aspect first. Even if it's offices and they have their diversity board, is that office even inclusive to have a diversity board? How are we working this? So I think it is just labels, and where people want to get away with things and check a box to mark like they've done an initiative versus actually doing the work. It goes back to what I'm saying, when you clump people into a box, there's no inclusion. And then we also lose that culture over colour aspect where any form of black and brown is good enough for representation, when actually representation only matters when it's in the right hands. The word diversity is so outdated. It's not really cutting it unless it's culture over colour and beyond surface level and understanding geography and history and community and aspects of that, then we can actually do diversity properly where it's not based on someone's appearances.
I always feel like I completely get where you're coming from, and it's us having to go through these different vocabulary or words or terms that has allowed us as a world to somewhat heal, go back to history, understand why things are the way they are, and then in a way kind of revise how we use these terms in our everyday life. So I think before diversity had a point in time where it was very relevant. Now we understand it for what it was. We now need to move towards, well, actually the new terminology is inclusion, as you're saying, because of what you've already mentioned about diversity in itself. And it was much needed because at the time it was black and brown and sex and all of those categories that needed to be defined to get back to people's psyche and understanding of the inherent exclusion that was going on, right? But now you know it. Let's move on to this is what actually inclusion looks like for everybody. And I think that's a powerful thought that you've brought to mind. And it sort of brings me back to this question on knowing that fashion operates with systems of exclusion, right? Like, how do you navigate pushing for systemic change while still working within the industry?
There is ultimately still often a white counterpart deciding on who gets that diverse inclusion access. or who's going to be on the board, or all this sort of stuff, you know? So I think we have to really reevaluate how we see diversity and inclusion. But yeah, going back to your point, it's really interesting because I think when you come from a marginalized background, you're so aware of your marginalization, and you still find marginalization. So it's like, oh gosh, it's like, what on earth? But I will say that the fashion industry is progressing. Yeah, maybe not as fast as we want it to, but it is progressing. And I really want to point out one thing. You know, we talk about the fashion musical chairs and these white men being creative directors, but why haven't we celebrated? Like, if you just take a step back, I understand that as a conversation, but look at the major fashion publications. Nearly every major fashion publication has a Black female editor-in-chief. So I'm like, actually, yes, this is really, really rubbish. What we have in just these constant musical chairs of white male creative directors, but we have this something so outstanding here that I think people are losing focus on. British Vogue, Elle, Marie Claire, they have Black women as the editor-in-chiefs. So there's a really interesting balance here. And I think it shows that work is being done, but there's still a lot more work to be done. And when it comes to someone as myself, I think, you know, there is a lot of lack of South Asian representation in fashion. However, we are seeing major ripples. And I always say small ripples make big waves. A lot of it for communities from our backgrounds, I think it starts at home. I think it starts by introducing kids to the arts and fashion. But then that doesn't mean that the job's entirely ours. It means that also when we're in these spaces, how do we then get access to these jobs? So there's a lot of work to do, but I think it's looking at it from a perspective that's like completely outside of it. But as someone inside of it, it is very fast paced, and it's kind of like what might matter today might not matter tomorrow.
I could say the same about, I mean, we talk a lot about Black people, but what is Black? Because we are still very different cultures, and Black is not, but you wouldn't say just white people, say European or something like that. There's a distinction. And I think what we're just finding is that there's been such a heavy play for years and years and years of a white-centric mentality when it comes to all of these wider jobs. I mean, fashion industry, right? And so it becomes almost abnormal or strange, even to those from a diverse background or global ethnic majority background, to see themselves being represented in a space that's always been taken over by a white Western look, right? And I feel like what's been really great is over the years that's changing, because you do have more Black and brown people being advertised in prominent campaigns, but it takes a while for everyone's psyche, including those in the global ethnic minority, to, I feel like, see that as normal and not just tokenized in a way. And even having my own brand and representing not on purpose, but because it's very inherent to my culture and heritage, all Black models from Black and brown models from varying different cultures and places from the African continent. And then we sitting back knowing I do have white Western customers, when they see Black models, what must really be going on in their psyche? Do they feel like it works for them? Are they seeing themselves in the brand? And I think I have to think about that as well, because in some instances, I could also be saying that I'm not being diverse. It's a monopoly, isn't it?
It is so hard. Like, it's so difficult because, like, going to what you said, it's the same thing as South Asian representation is beyond India. And it is Pakistan, it is Bangladesh, it is all these. And you know, it's like it's South Asian Heritage Month. And I'd be lying if there's some great stuff lined up. But there is a theme that I see: South Asian panels, but majority of them are from Indian backgrounds. That's not diversity. So then how do we as a community actually preach what we say around inclusion? If you're like brown or Black, you're not all the same. So how can we also then celebrate identity? And this is exactly what I mean by culture over color. Someone said to me, we have 10 South Asians working for us, but if I go behind the scenes and everyone's from the same background, from the same city, from the similar boroughs, that's not diversity and inclusion. That's why that whole monopoly is so tiring. And I think when I feel like the term culture of a colour speaks so much sense, we're not saying don't know, and I'm saying yes 100%, because visibility is important, but the culture also matters, because all the cultures are similar but not the same. And that even goes for a white counterpart being represented. And I've always said, look, I don't always feel like someone needs to look like me for me to feel represented. I need to be able to relate to their story. If I saw a working class person from Bradford who grew up around the same area as me, I don't know, stop on the cover of British Vogue or whatever, I'd be like, yo, that's sick. Because I relate to that drive, I relate to their story, I relate to where they come from. And this is why it doesn't matter what it is culture over colour, but I also understand the powerful aspect of visible representation.
I really love how we're both in a fashion industry, but even when you talk, it's so rounded, because I think this is a conversation that really goes beyond fashion. This is important knowledge and info. So thank you so much for being so just broad about it. But if we were to bring it down to fashion, I'm going to start with everybody. Arooj Aftab was recognized for her work with Done with Diversity as a new gen entrepreneur and agitator, and was featured in Vogue Business 100. I think that's
Oh man, thank you. You know what, it's mad because I not that I said to mention it, but it's like that reality is still like, oh yeah, that happened. It's like, it's crazy. Thank you so much. Honestly, getting that was crazy because I was just like, I got the email and I was like, what? Me? What have I done? You know? And I am my biggest critic. I think I think like anybody listening to this might understand it. When you, and I say this again, fighting marginalization, nothing ever feels enough. So to get something like that and actually flowers in an aspect is that kind of reflection of flowers because people are acknowledging the work, but I don't do it for acknowledgement. I need that impact. And I feel like, however, to have a credential like that, you'd hope that somebody might take you a bit more seriously, being like, oh, we should listen to this girl. In an aspect, that's why these credentials and accomplishments matter, because it's sort of like bittersweet, and it's a shame to say it, but yes, it's the hope that you get taken more seriously. Not that nothing's changed from who you were before that or who you are after that, but if we're in an industry in the arts or fashion that thrives on tags and names and who do you know and what have you achieved, then it helps, you know? And there is a sense of elitism, and you kind of have to play the game but not compromise your personality or sacrifice who you are. So yeah, to get that was like crazy, and I'm just a girl from Bradford. That's wild.
I know you've soaked in, and as entrepreneurs, we are our hardest critics. So, girl, I completely understand that. And I think I mentioned that because let's pay our dues. You've done the work, and you've done so many phenomenal things that have started to help shape the landscape of really where we want fashion to go, right? And so I guess like last question would be, what advice would you give to emerging creators from the global ethnic majority, and the different backgrounds that we've been discussing, trying to break into fashion or influence culture on their own terms?
You know what? There's not one advice that fits all, but if we're looking at fashion, it depends how brave you are. But I'd say be a non-conformist. We are in such a different day and age. I don't think this whole thing of like devil wears Prada exists. So it's kind of like be a non-conformist, but not deliberately like guns blazing, but the more individual and authentic you are to yourself, the more people can relate to you, surprisingly. Don't be a yes person. Like, there's far too many yes people, and it's just boring. We need people that challenge things, and we need people that actually are brave enough to say things. And I think it helps anybody in the industry, especially if you're from a background like ours. It's like, if I say this, well, I have the backing kind of thing, and we need the backing. So it's kind of like, yeah, be a non-conformist. It is always a place for everybody in the industry. And I always say this as well, like if I have to bring my own seat to sit at a table, then I don't want to be in that room or sit at the table because I can't be bothered with that. And I think it's taken me a while to understand that. Like, I started in the industry when I was 20 something, or even younger actually, because I was blogging, maybe 16. But funny in the industry, like 20 something. I'm now 29, I'm going to be 30. And it's really strange because people were like, oh, when you reach 30, you don't give an F about anything. I feel like I'm getting to that. I feel like it's kind of like, I now get it. Like, you just wake up one day and you're like, you know what? I don't care. But I think that's also because of you're more sure about what you do. You're confident about what you do. You're not questioning your worth because you know what you do is good. And my work will always be for the community and for the people, and understanding that there is room for everybody and fashion's universal. Even, for example, being from the north of England, from the city of Bradford, which is known as the wool industry, where people from Savile Row used to come up to Bradford to get their material. Even that level of being like, actually, we need to decentralize London, and London's great, but what about the people that contribute to fashion? It's not purely about race. It's not purely about how we look. It's the culture and the upbringings and the experiences we come from that really shape us. So yeah, if you are young, look beyond surface level, beyond yourself, and actually, who are you and what do you bring to the table?
It's so inspiring to speak to you always. Like, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. This has been so cool. I feel like I could chat for ages.
I love that. Thank you so much. So I've got like a quick fire round. So you have to be as quick as you can in trying to answer. Are you ready? If you could have coffee with any fashion brand's marketing team, past or present, who would it be?
That's a hard one. I don't know what to say. Why have I forgotten everybody's name? Kenya Hunt, our magazine.
Yes. Nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. 2, which brand rebrand actually slapped?
Ralph Lauren.
Yes, I saw that over the weekend. He did good.
Yeah.
He did really good. Okay. 3, one trend you wish the algorithm would just bury forever.
Laura Rose jeans.
Which brand would you let take over your IG stories for a day?
Bottega, but they don't have Instagram. That's the beauty of it.
Do they not? Oh, that's new.
No.
And
There's someone in the marketing team that's running the way. Oh, Loewe. Either one of those.
I agree. They're really, really beautiful, crafted brands, right? And I love the new sort of creative directors and design teams that they have. It's authentic. It's amazing. Okay, last one. What's the biggest digital red flag in a fashion campaign?
As in, wait, I need to get more context on that. As in just a digital campaign. Lack of representation and oversight.
Of course, that has to be the only
answer on that. I don't know why you remember that, but I'm like, I'm going to find a way back into the view of this conversation. Obviously, the lack of representation. We're in 2025. Let's not be tone deaf.
Absolutely. Arooj, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. And to our audience, get ready for the next podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to click follow to keep up to date with the latest episodes. And if you like this episode, please give us a review. If you want us to feature a specific theme or guest, please give us a message at beyondform.io. I will see you very soon.